to my live broadcast on this special occasion of Nigeria's Democracy Day. The June 12th has been recognized as Nigeria's Democracy Day by former President Muhammadu Buhari. It was his administration that turned June 12th a Democracy Day, because hitherto May 29 had been observed as Democracy Day. That was shifted to June 12th because of the rule of the June 12th 1993 presidential election that was annulled by the military in shaping the outcomes of our democracy. If you recall, in 1993, Nigerians went to the poll to elect new set of civilian administration after years of military rule headed by General Ibrahim Babangida. However, the outcome of that election, in which the presidential candidate of the then Social Democratic Party, Moshood Abiola, who was presumed to have won that election, was not allowed to take over government. In fact, the election was annulled midway. And that election has been adjudged true or false, the freest and freest election in Nigeria's history. At least that's what was projected. That's what Nigerians were told. I grew up reading it on the pages of newspaper that it was the freest and fairest election we have ever had. So, and that is what it is. So because of that annulment, there was agitation, there was protest, there was determination that the military must be sent back to the barracks. Eventually, that became possible following the death of the then head of state, General Sani Abacha, who was the head of state as at the time Abiola died in detention. Because if you go through the historical aspect of it, it was Babangida administration that annulled the election, but Abacha was part of that administration. After the annulment of June 12th election, then there was an interim government headed by Ernest Shonekon, in which, as Babangida was stepping aside, he left behind his staunchest supporters in the military, including General Sani Abacha, who after a few months, kicked out Shonekon and became military head of state. Okay, it was within that period that Abacha was insisting that he won the 1993 June 12th election and that he is the president. He declared himself president. And Sani Abacha could not take it. He bundled him to prison. And he was in detention until Abacha died in 1998. Following the death of Abacha, this man, General Abdulsalam Abubakar, became our head of state, and who hastened to hand over power to the civilian administration in 1999. Now, we now have to look at a historical context of where we are coming from. If you look at Nigeria's recent history since 1960. So it's important that we take note of our recent history before we go into assessment of this democracy, whether democracy have served Nigerians well, and what is the way forward, especially in the light of what happened in the 2023 general election in Nigeria, in which was adjudged one of the worst elections ever held in Nigeria. But we need to build a background to where we are coming from before we now look at where we are going, where we are, and where we are going. Now, after Nigeria got its independence in 1960, we had 6 years of civilian administration before the military coup of 1966. It was that military coup of 1966 that led to the entrance of military dictatorship in Nigeria. That military intervention eventually culminated to a civil war, but that's not our subject here. But civilian administration operated after the British left formally in 1960. They operated for 6 years. We have 6 years of civilian administration before the military took over in 1966. And the military was in charge for 13 years between 1966 and 1979. So they were in charge for 13 years. So many of the political players you are seeing today were a product of that military dictatorship, either as a student, either as soldiers, or whatever capacity they participated. So we had military for 13 years. Now, Nigeria returned to democracy in 1979. So between 1979 and 1984, we had democracy again. We had democracy, but just for 5 years. That was during the administration of Shehu Shagari, with Dr. Alex Ekweme as his vice president. Civil administration lasted for only 5 years. And then Nigeria returned back to military dictatorship following the military coup of 1984, in which General Muhammad Buhari, General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, and all of them, they participated in kicking out the civilian. Now, after civilians were kicked out, the military ruled again for under 15 years until 1979, when we returned to the present democracy we are enjoying today. So democracy in Nigeria today, we have had about 24 years of uninterrupted democracy, beginning from 1999. But if you look at generally our history, we are on paper, we appear to be doing well in respect of democracy, because right now, going by the figures, Nigeria has had, beginning from 1960, Nigeria has had 35 years of turbulent democracy. Democracy, 35 years, if you count from 1960. And we have had 28 years of military dictatorship since 1960. But we are having our longest run of democracy without military intervention in this dispensation since 1999. That is what we are going to look at. We are going to examine how far we have gone in managing our democracy. Is our democracy stronger today, or is getting worse than we wanted? Are we replacing, or have we replaced military dictatorship with civilian dictatorship? Looking at what happened in the 2023 general election in Nigeria. Because right now, truth be told, Nigeria's democracy may look strong from the outside. The truth is that Nigeria's democracy is dying as a result of corruption. Political corruption is the bane of Nigeria's democracy. And I will use what happened in the 2023 general election to tell you and to show you that corruption is killing Nigeria's democracy. Political corruption is killing Nigeria's democracy. And this is not new. Political corruption has been here with Nigeria for a very long time. The history of Nigeria is history of political corruption. If you look at the crisis in the Western region, that eventually, what they call the weighty crisis, it all has to do with political corruption. And political corruption has not left Nigeria, and it's getting worse now than ever because of the way the civilians are operating with impunity, believing that nothing can stop them from carrying out that kind of impunity with total disregard for the will of the Nigerian people. So we are going to examine that, and you look at things that happened in the 2023 general election, and you find out that indeed corruption, political corruption, is killing Nigeria's democracy. A typical example is what happened at the run-up to the election. The Independent National Electoral Commission promised Nigerians that the Electoral Act, which they were part of the formation, will form the bedrock of their activities. They went to town telling everyone that they are going to use technology to execute the 2023 general election. That 2023 general election is going to be foolproof. It's going to be an election in which the riggers, those who have been known to be perpetual riggers, that they are not going to have the opportunity to rig again. That application of technology, that there will be transmission of results from the polling unit to the beavers, and from the beavers to the INEC IRIF on real time. That galvanized a lot of Nigerians to go and register to vote. Nigeria had a wave of new registrants, young people, who are encouraged by what the INEC was promising and backed by the Electoral Act that was reluctantly signed by former President Muhammadu Buhari. Many people were energized that this election is going to be a game changer in Nigeria's democracy, that it is going to be a game changer. Time and again, INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, was everywhere telling us that nothing, there are videos of him trending where he said nothing can stop the use of beavers. Nothing can stop electronic transmission of election results from the polling unit to the IRIF to the IRIF, from the polling unit to beavers to the IRIF. That's what we are told. That's what Nigerians were told. People were mobilized. People were energized. People were hopeful. In fact, that was what mobilized Nigerian youths to throw in their heart in the ring that they want to be part of the process. And they found in Peter Obi, the presidential candidate of Labour Party, as the man that could drive the youth energy into the political process of Nigeria. But what did Nigeria get? What did Nigerians get? on February 25, 2023 presidential election. What you had was technology that supposed to work for Nigeria. The technology failed Nigeria. Not that the technology, the machines failed, but men failed technology. And it is believed that men failed technology deliberately, not because of the machine. It was the men that failed and not machine. On the election day, the most important of all the election of 2023 general election, the most important of all the election, the only election in which all Nigerians voted are to elect the leader of the country. On that election day, the beavers, the operators of the beavers, the INEC chairman failed big time. They failed big time. They failed in their promise to transmit the presidential election result from the polling units to the beavers, from the beavers to the INEC area. It never happened. But the senatorial and House of Representatives election, which took place at the same time, was successfully transmitted. So what happened to the machine that it couldn't transmit the presidential election results? INEC spokesperson, Festus Okoye, said that there was panic that day. There was glitches. But why did the glitches affect only the presidential result? It didn't affect the senatorial and House of Representatives results. That is where we talk about political corruption. How corruption is killing Nigeria's democracy. Corruption could be the only explanation that can explain why the senatorial and House of Representatives result was able to pull through the glitches and was uploaded real time. But the presidential election suffered permanent glitches to the level that even as I'm talking to you, as we are talking right now on Nigeria's Democracy Day, not all the results of the presidential election that was held in February 25 are uploaded in the INEC archive. INEC does not have its own conviction, the courage to put the whole results out there on the archive. They are still dilly-dallying about showing the true result, the result they use in announcing victory for the presidential candidate of the All Progressive Congress, the ruling party, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. That is where we are. And to show the impunity of how corruption has eaten deep, the confidence that the system, those who have corrupted the system have, they said, go to court. And when you get to court, they are frustrating you in the court. Look at what happened on Saturday at the tribunal. Look at what happened on Saturday at the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal in Abuja. Peter Obi wanted, as a petition against the declaration of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu as the winner of that election. And he made an application to quiz INEC ICT team so that they can be able to tell the court What happened on February 25? Why was the glitches on their portal? Why did the glitches on INEC portal affect only the presidential election and it didn't affect the senatorial and House of Representatives election results? These were simple. There were simple things that P2B wanted to ask these ICT people in INEC, so that the justices of the presidential election tribunal will be able to hear them out to decipher whether there was deliberate internal sabotage. Because already it is a given that there was no external sabotage. Why did I say that there was no external sabotage? If you look at the host of INEC portal, the host for it that protects it is Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services guaranteed you at least 99% protection. It is seen as the best in the world. And it had been reported that they say that there was no external attack against the INEC server. That's what we are made to understand. But also, there's another problem where I tell you also that there's corruption in Nigerian politics that's affecting our democracy. In the application of P2B is applying for this man, for the Amazon Web Services provider to be able to be subpoenaed so that they can come and give evidence at a court. But that application is also being delayed and it may not be granted. So these are some of the things you look at. You find out that our democracy may be growing in numbers, but our democracy is not growing in real time. Because what we are now having is a situation where you have routine election. But having routine election is not democracy. Democracy has to be the will of the people. When people vote and their votes don't count, and some big men up there in the INEC office manipulate the situation to give the results that they want and not the result that Nigerians want, that is killing of democracy. Democracy is dying. And we all saw it in real time. After they bungled the 2023 presidential election, the subsequent election, people tuned off. People didn't even bother to go and vote again. And that was when the governors perpetrated the highest level of election stealing this country has ever witnessed. That's why in a state like Imo State, who you can sample the opinion of the people, they don't want to have anything with the ruling All Progressive Congress. But the ruling All Progressive Congress returned all the State House of Assembly members as APC Senator, House of Assembly elect. It was a field day for electoral thieves, because people just lost hope, because their hope was dashed on February 25. If INEC has stuck to its gun that it will transmit the results diligently from the polling units, presidential election result in particular, if they had done that, our democracy would have been stronger. It wouldn't have been as shaky as it is right now. Because you know that the whole thing was so shaky that even there were doubts by people whether the announced winner will be sworn in. For the first time since 1999, there was a growing debate whether the INEC announced winner of the election should be sworn in. Of course, it was eventually sworn in, but it was the first time since 1999 that after the presidential election, people were asking and are looking at the Constitution whether to swear in or not to swear in Aswad Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Because for the first time, we are electing, or INEC is allowing the election of a president without getting 25% of the votes in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, as required in the Constitution. Because this is the Constitution we are talking about, not the Electoral Act. Because when there is a conflict between the Constitution and the Electoral Act, the Constitution takes precedent over the Electoral Act, which is just an act of the Parliament. The Constitution stipulates in Section 134, subsection 2B, that for anyone to be declared the president-elect or the winner of a presidential election in Nigeria, there are three fundamental facts, positions that the person must reach. First, the person must have the highest number of votes cast in the election. Secondly, the person must get 25% in 2/3 of the 36 states. The Constitution was clear what he wanted. 36 of the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. And the "and" had been interpreted by the Supreme Court as conjunctive. That if you get 2/3, 25% of the 2/3 of the 36 states of the Federation, if you don't get 25% in Abuja, you have failed. It's just like if you don't pass Maths and English, that you have not made it. You can have A's in the other subjects, but you must get Maths and English. You must give them credit for you to qualify for certain admissions. On a day before the February 25, Mike Ngini, former resident electoral commissioner of Akwa Ibom State, was all over the place. He was on Arise, he was on channels, he was everywhere saying it, that this election that will take place tomorrow on February 25th, whoever is going to be declared the winner of the election must get 25% of the votes cast in Abuja. And he said that 25% in Abuja is like the compulsory question that must be answered. What did we get? We had a situation where Aswad Bola Ahmed Tinubu did not get that 25%. And he has been sworn in. If this is how Nigerian democracy will continue to grow, it is dying even in growth. Nigeria's democracy is dying in growth. So what you see now is Nigerian democracy is being eaten by termites. One day you will see the big tree, Iroko tree, will fall because the termites have eaten it off because of corruption. So anybody who wants the best for Nigeria, the person must insist on due process. The person must insist on observing the tenets of democracy. Democracy cannot be halfway. It has to be full-blown. You cannot have civilian administration meanwhile what you are operating is dictatorship. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. You either become China, you become Russia, or you become Syria, or you become United States or United Kingdom. You cannot pretend to be democracy and then you operate like dictatorship, where you win election at all costs, where you kill people before you win, where ethnic cleansing are carried out, people are deliberately suppressed, like the trending video of former governor of Kaduna State, where he's speaking with pride, gloating that his religion has triumphed over Nigeria, over Kaduna State, and that there is no going back. And he's saying all these things in an election that was massively rigged, according to reports by local and international observers. So does it mean that God supports rigging? Does it mean that God supports political corruption? That you will emerge under this condition, you think that God has helped you or that your religion has triumphed. Does your religion condone corruption? Does your religion condone killings? Does your religion condone ethnic cleansing? Because unless it does so, you don't have to gloat, to celebrate your triumph when it is tainted by corruption. Nigerians were made to go and waste their time on February 25. Because if Nigeria had been told that INEC will now decide its means of transmission of results, after telling us all these months that technology will be the process, then on election day, you change the goalpost, telling Nigerians that now you reserve the right to collect results as you like. But why didn't you tell us all those why? Why didn't you tell Nigerians that you're not going to use electronic transmission of results? Why go about deceiving the country? Why go about wasting everybody's time? People could have stayed home, but they went and lined up, some of them at the risk of their lives. There are many people that were bloodied in Lagos. They still went back to the polls after cleaning the bloods and everything. They came, voted and stuff. And instead of INEC to do the right thing, INEC deliberately, as alleged, shut down the beavers. Because I could see several places where the electoral officials were saying that they have not received the code from Abuja. Who was holding that code? Who was the person in charge? That was the reason why PTOB wanted to talk to the ICT people. But the tribunal turned his application down because they don't want the truth to be told. So whatever victory those who won in 2023 election are enjoying, especially in the ruling party, it's a firing victory. They know it. In an election in which the president was elected, there was no jubilation. An election in which Nigeria was like a graveyard after the result was announced on March 1. It's an unfortunate development, but it was an example that democracy is not thriving in Nigeria, no matter what anyone tells you. Because the conduct of election does not mean democracy. Russia conducts election. China conducts election. Syria conducts election. Even when Fidel Castro was alive, he conducts election. Even Muammar Gaddafi, when he was in charge of Libya, he conducts election. So conduct of election means nothing. It doesn't mean that democracy is growing. Robert Mugabe, he conducts routine election. And he won all of them. Is that an example of democracy? Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, he conducts election routinely, and he has been winning all the elections. Can you, in all honesty, say that what you have in Uganda is democracy? What you have in Uganda is civilian administration and routine election that gives semblance of democracy. And that is what we are now having in Nigeria. That is what we are now having in Nigeria. 2023 was an opportunity to show that democracy has come to stay in Nigeria. But INEC destroyed as prospect by its shabby conduct of the election. It was so shabbily done, and the rigging with so much impunity, like telling Nigerians you can go and do your worst. But meanwhile, we don't want to see you on the street demonstrating. If we see you, we know you are one of the agents of calling for interim government. They will take care of you. The Electoral Act was specific. It's not compulsory that you must announce the results immediately. But INEC chairman, he refused to allow the opposition parties to raise their case. When they were at the collection center at the International Conference Center, he was telling them that they are going to look into their grievance. They are going to look into the issue they have raised. He never looked into that issue. In the middle of the night, or the wee hours, when Nigerians were asleep, he announced Aswaju as the winner of the election. That is a typical example of political corruption at its best. He announced it and tell you to go to court. Those who are aggrieved can go to court. That's political corruption. When you told the opposition that you are going to look into it, and the opposition was expecting you to interface with them, you couldn't interface with them. You announced the results. Then why did you allow the interface that happened in Adamawa? Why did you allow the interface that happened in Abia State and so many other states? Because that is what the law says. But on the most important of all the elections, you didn't allow that to apply. You rushed and announced the president-elect. Because you know that if you announce it, the next thing is that you transfer all the problems you created to the courts. So the court has now become the last man standing. And the court, to many Nigerians, does not inspire confidence. And why? Why is it that Nigerians don't have confidence in the court? It's all about political corruption. But for that, everybody should have confidence in the court. But many Nigerians, they look at some recent court rulings, Supreme Court rulings, and they shake their heads and say, can we really get justice? The electoral act was clear. You cannot contest for the office of the president and went back and contest for the office of the Senate. But that was exactly what Ahmed Lawan and Godswill Akpabio did, and the court allowed them. They are now senators-elect to be inaugurated tomorrow, January 13th, by Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the beneficiary of Annex Shabby 2023 general election. That is what we have in the country. That is the state of our democracy. There is total despondent. People are literally fed up. They're just minding their business, hoping that a miracle will happen in the courts, hoping that somehow that the justices of the tribunal, justices of the Supreme Courts will rise above board, will show themselves worthy to be counted among the incorruptible justices of this world. But can they? Can they be able to rise to the occasion? You never know. You never know. Maybe they may redeem themselves. Maybe they may do the best for Nigeria and ensure that all the stolen votes are removed from all those who stole it and are returned to the original owners of those votes, so that we can have a president, a governor, a lawmaker that represent the true will of Nigerian people. Because that is really what Nigerians are looking for. They are not looking for much. They want their vote to count. Now their votes did not count. INEC counted whatever he likes, especially in the presidential election, because he refused to follow the due process. It refused to follow its own guidelines. I have several videos of INEC chairman promising that nothing can stop electronic transmission of results real time. I have several of it. Some of them have been played in the courts by Peter Obi's legal team. I have shared them in my channel, many of them. That is evidence against INEC. Because what INEC did was no different from what Yahoo boys do. Deceive people, obtaining by pretense. He was all over the place, Mahmoud Yakubu, promising electronic transmission of results, e-transmission. When he was at Chatham House, he was making noises over there about e-transmission. He was telling the international community. That is why the international community should deal with INEC too. Because I know that they collect money from United States aid, USAID. They collect money, they donate money to INEC. It's not only the budgetary allocation from Nigeria that they use in conduct election. They collect money from the European Union. They collect money from so many other foreign partners. And look at the election they conducted, shabbily. And so this international community should stop giving INEC money. They don't deserve those kind of funding. And that's why the officials of INEC should be punished by the international community for the kind of election they conducted in Nigeria after collecting millions of dollars from USAID and all these donor agencies, European Union and what have you. If Nigerian government don't care about how you waste money on election, I think those people should be able to care about the money they release to Nigerians to conduct election. If that's what happened in 2023 election, is what it takes to be a democracy. So it's so sad for Nigeria. This Democracy Day is a sad one for Nigerians. It's a sad one for Nigerians because INEC messed it up. INEC messed it up. It didn't follow its guideline, either in the conduct of the election or in the declaration of the winner of the election, especially in the presidential election, and even in the subsequent election. Because what happened was that after the presidential election went the way it did, the subsequent election was like a bazaar for election riggers to do whatever they like. And the INEC stood by and watched electoral haste everywhere. And the ruling party was smiling to the bank, so to say, that they have the highest number of elected governors and what have you. It was that people were no longer interested in INEC election. That was why all those APC governors, many of them returned, literally without any stress. Except in few places where the governors of APC were so bad that they just have to go, like in Zamfara. But for that, APC had their way in the governorship election. And if what INEC did in this election is to continue, even in the subsequent election that are coming up in November in Kogi State, the one coming up I think also in November in Imo State, and what have you. We have Bayelsa. I don't know what Bayelsa is among them, but the Bayelsa is going to have an election this year. So, what does this inspire hope? INEC will just announce APC that they have won. Those of them have been returned. That's probably what you're going to see. No matter what is happening right now in Imo State, INEC will announce Uzodimma has been returned elected. Then they will announce the candidate Ododo, the preferred candidate of outgoing governor of Kogi State, Yaya Bello. They will announce he has won, has been re-elected. So in Bayelsa, that's where they are likely to have it. And they are likely to say that the former petroleum minister of state, he has won, and the INEC will announce it. Can't expect anything different from this set of INEC leadership to conduct all these staggered elections, and you think they will be different. I just pity those who are competing in those states who are not from the ruling party. How this INEC will conduct election and any other party outside APC will win with what they exhibited in the general election. It is difficult. Look, political corruption has killed Nigerian democracy. It's killing Nigerian democracy. And if we're not careful, the impunity that comes with the political corruption will bury Nigeria's democracy. Yes, to bury it. Unless Nigerians are vigilant, and unless the courts rise to the occasion to save Nigeria's democracy, INEC will help in burying democracy in Nigeria. And as I said, conducting an election, if those elections are not transparent, that's not democracy. So many dictatorships around the world, they conduct elections and announce results. That doesn't mean that they are democratic. That doesn't mean that what happened in their country is the will of the people. What you see and what is manifesting is the will of the few and not the will of Nigerians. That is not democracy. Thank you for being part of this this live broadcast on Nigeria's Democracy Day. And it's an opportunity for us to look at Nigeria democracy, where it is going. And you can see the verdict. Nigeria's democracy is going nowhere. It is one step forward, 3 steps backward. That is what we are having. The only thing that will save our democracy right now is the judiciary. If the Supreme Court, the appeal courts can rise to the occasion and do the right thing, they can save this democracy. They can stop this democracy from dying. The ball is in the courts of the judiciary. Thank you for being part of this, and God bless you and yours.